Headlines are screaming U.S. coercion or Oman surrendering to Iran, but they miss the real game. The United States isn't asking Muscat to enforce a blockade. It is demanding that Oman become a living buffer zone in a great power collision. This story has nothing to do with oil flow and everything about geography as leverage. When small states sit on critical choke points, their sovereignty does not vanish. It transforms into the only tool capable of preventing total war. To understand this dynamic, we must first discard the narrative that Oman is simply bowing under pressure from Washington or Tehran. The reality is far more complex and rooted in hard strategic constraints. Recent analysis of escalation scenarios indicates a fundamental shift where Oman has moved from being viewed merely as an energy transit point to becoming an indispensable component of containment strategies. In recent escalations, specifically around March 2026, Iran utilized its geographic position not just to threaten oil supplies generally, but to leverage that threat directly against regional adversaries like Israel and U.S. interests. The strategic calculus here is stark. The United States cannot simply enforce a blockade across the strait without risking a direct kinetic conflict with Tehran. Such an escalation would spike global prices beyond $100 per barrel for Brent crude, which had already hit over 92 in March 2026 after rising 28% in a single week. Instead of military force, Washington's strategy relies on Oman to absorb the shock. By maintaining neutrality and acting as a de-escalation channel similar to diplomatic missions seen previously, Oman allows for shipping security guarantees via naval escorts without triggering an immediate Iranian response that would close the strait entirely. This dynamic is reinforced by global supply realities where the United States has had to loosen sanctions on Russian oil imports into India and rely heavily on its own shale production because a prolonged shutdown would create a massive deficit of roughly 20 million barrels per day globally. Oman's value lies in its ability to keep this off switch from being pulled by Iran, effectively making it the critical variable that determines whether a regional skirmish becomes a global energy crisis. Quick resource note: I keep a curated set of Amazon search links in the description for books, gear, and tools relevant to this channel's topics. Some are affiliate links, so I may earn a commission at no extra cost to you. Please consider supporting the channel by using those links if you find something useful. This shift explains why the concept of sovereignty changes when geography is involved. Viewers often assume power means having an army or nuclear weapons. But in this specific choke point scenario, Oman's leverage comes from its inability to be ignored by both Tehran and Washington simultaneously. If the United States forces a blockade on Iranian waters, Iran closes the strait, prices skyrocket into recessionary territory, and global supply chains fracture. By pressuring Oman to act as a neutral buffer rather than a belligerent enforcer, the U.S. acknowledges that geography trumps military might here. The pressure is not about making Oman enforce rules it cannot physically impose. It is about asking Muscat to hold space for diplomacy when violence would be the default reaction from any other actor in the region. The stakes are immediate and extend far beyond oil traders or geopolitical specialists. If Oman fails to maintain this delicate neutrality during great power collisions, the strait becomes a weaponized zone rather than a trade corridor. This destabilizes everything from European energy security to Asian manufacturing supply chains that rely on just-in-time delivery systems vulnerable to price shocks. The U.S. demand for Oman to act as a buffer is an admission of limits. It signals that Washington understands its own military tools are insufficient without the diplomatic cover only Muscat can provide. In 2026, the strait transformed from a critical trade route into a focal point for great power containment, where the location of a nation matters more than its budget or weapon count. The mechanism works because Oman's neutrality is credible to both sides in ways that other regional actors are not. While Gulf neighbors might be viewed as aligned with one side, Muscat has cultivated relationships across the spectrum, allowing it to serve as a communication channel when direct lines have been severed. This utility makes small states indispensable when great powers collide. The U.S. does not need Oman to fight. It needs Oman to exist in a way that prevents Iran from feeling forced to shut down the world's most critical oil artery. When leaders announce sanctions or diplomatic ultimatums, The headline is rarely the whole story. The question is, who designed the incentive, who cannot afford to walk away, and what option still looks rational on each side? For the curious viewer following world events, this explains why Oman appears to be yielding in press reports when it is actually exercising high-value strategic utility. It is not submission, it is a calculated preservation of sovereignty through geographic neutrality. The U.S. acknowledges that forcing a blockade would trigger an Iranian response that no amount of naval power could easily reverse without catastrophic economic consequences. By leveraging Oman's unique position, Washington seeks to keep the off switch from being pulled while avoiding the very war they wish to contain. This approach highlights how realpolitik operates in practice. States do not always act on moral imperatives or maximum force. They often choose the path of least resistance that preserves their core interests and global stability. The lesson here transcends this specific crisis. In a world where great power competition is intensifying, small nations with strategic geography are finding new forms of agency. They are not merely victims caught between giants, but essential variables in the equations of war and peace. Their location makes them the most powerful actors in the room when it comes to controlling access to critical resources. Understanding this dynamic allows us to see past the noise of partisan framing or moral outrage to the underlying structures that drive state behavior. We are witnessing a shift where geography becomes the ultimate deterrent and neutrality becomes the primary weapon against escalation. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. I am a one-person team working hard to make each video better than the last. Subscribe if you found value. It is the best way to show support. Drop a comment with your biggest takeaway. See you in the next video.